Hello, and welcome to A Chat Over Cocoa, where we analyse media while we're drinking hot chocolate.
Specifically today, we're going to be looking at single camera techniques, 3 each that we've already analysed prior to this recording sesh. Alright, so first up we've got a promotional video called FaceWatch. Now, okay, so the introduction to FaceWatch is obviously a standard size lens. Now, one of the key things that I noticed is obviously throughout the entirety of the video, it's basically the same lens. It doesn't really change, and there's no difference in size or focal length either. However, obviously one of the things that I noticed is that occasionally there are some areas where it's zoomed in slightly and on areas where the depth of field is slightly bigger. And obviously one of the effects that this gives to the audience is that we are meant to be, obviously as it's a promotional video, we are meant to be seeing it through the eyes of what the company FaceWatch actually wants us to see. So obviously it makes us feel as though we're a part of this and we're actually watching
Miniature community.
A miniature community take place. And obviously the entire product itself is obviously an online service. Which I've already worked closely with through work, and obviously the way this company has actually produced a video for FaceWatch, obviously I don't know what I was going to say. I just cut it. I just cut it when I stopped. And obviously the way that the company who recorded this for FaceWatch wanted you to interpret it is obviously as a part of this community, because this community is obviously facing criminal activity and stuff, as seen in the video itself. It explains it in the video with a narrative, but obviously unless you feel part of that, you won't feel as insecure and as vulnerable as the audience, as the company who made the video wants you to feel. If you watch the video and go, okay, well, I'm not part of this, I don't need to worry, and obviously it defeats the object of the video itself. Obviously, it's obviously the company who created this video obviously wants to make you feel slightly insecure, slightly vulnerable to crimes.
So that makes you want to purchase the said services.
It makes you want to be able to buy the services and actually involved. Obviously this does this really effectively because of the fact that it uses a standard lens. Obviously it doesn't actually use many camera movements either. So basically it makes you feel like as a static and vulnerable piece of equipment within the props itself, within that little community that you watch in the video.
And it's like you said, it's like a normal 50mm portrait lens. It sort of simulates what we would see from all these different angles as well.
Precisely.
To make us feel more like we're watching a community.
Precisely.
And how insecure and crime-ridden it can be.
Even when it was going through the criminal activity in the shops with the CCTV camera, you don't watch it take place, because obviously if you watch it take place in real life, you honestly feel, you feel as though you have to get involved and call the police. What it did was obviously feel as though you were the one being robbed, you were the one who owned the shop, obviously, because you're looking through your own CCTV camera. It had the entire overlay over. Obviously it makes it feel like it's your shop and you're the one who has to take care of it yourself.
Yeah. Okay, so onto the piece, a piece I've analysed. This is I guess you could call it short drama piece, meant to be sort of entertainment for everyone. It's made by Corridor Digital. It's I think they've got over 1 million subscribers, I'm pretty sure.
They've got a lot of subscribers.
And it's basically when they can test out their use of single camera techniques. Before I go into too much detail, I'll sort of outline the equipment they use. They use Red Cinema cameras, which means the best of the best. I mean, you can't get any better than Red Cinema cameras unless you get some...
Especially as a YouTuber.
As a YouTube company. I mean, they have actually been working on actual TV shows recently.
They have indeed, yeah.
So that's pretty good. And this particular clip is called Tiny Guns, where it's sort of like a comedy take on the 80s Hawaiian police, and they have to take down some gang of criminals using tiny guns. What else would you expect from the name of the clip? So let's go through it. So you see, this actually uses a variety of different lenses, and this is to make sort of it feel very human, like you are just a bystander watching it, basically, and makes you feel involved with the action. So you see a lot of the shots are actually close-ups on their faces to sort of emphasize their emotion and feeling. So like right now, they're discussing how they're going to take down said criminal organization and how serious their faces are. And I see they're also using slow motion to give a bit of emphasis on like the dramatic of them coming out of the car, the tension building up. And you know, it's a really nice look to it. As you see, there's some mid shots, there's some wide angles, there's some close-ups. As you see, also they've done some After Effects where their lenses of their glasses are not actually reflecting the camera, so just adds some more realism. And you see that's probably either a telephoto or macro lens showing the gun, and it's really emphasis on how small things are. And sort of you could also say it's sort of a trickery of how sort of we interpret things. So to them, right now, that is the most real gun you could ever see. And of course there's some real money as well. Yeah. And as we go later into the clip, there is a specific portion where sort of the reality does change, where they pull out what I would consider a pretty meaty gun. And
pretty big gun.
They talk to each other of how this is useless and how it would not work. So he hits it, and hidden inside are loads of tiny guns, sort of playing with the reality of what's real and what's not real.
Again, in slow motion to build up the tension.
Yeah, again in slow motion to build up tension. And there's loads of camera movements. I mean, there's pans, there's tracking shots. I think there isn't actually use of a dolly. This is all handheld, so pretty good job whoever the cameraman was in this shoot. And it really creates emphasis that you are there trying to avoid the action as well. And you're just seeing everything. I mean, just cinematography wise, this is great. You're getting lovely scenery, you're getting CGI that's well implemented. I mean, that's a portrait lens because obviously you see the depth of field, making you sort of feel the connection to the character, how he's been pinned down to a corner, he's the only one left, and he just decides to throw up another tiny gun, as you normally would do if you're stuck in this situation. And he throws it up. They literally have a telephoto or close-up of the little gun, and then they more CG of shooting tiny guns. Of what else would you expect? And they take this sense of reality even further right at the end, where their actual boss, you see, is miniature, and when they hand him the gun, to him it's regular sized. So again, then you're starting to question what actual reality is taking in right now. And see? And you just see the gun. And it's regular size. And it really messes with your brain because interpretation-wise, is he actually sized? Or are they actually sized? Yeah. What is reality at this point?
Yeah, really cleverly done.
And it is really cleverly done. And it really makes you think of how they sort of, how you feel as a part of the audience, sort of taking in this film. Sort of like, are you a miniature person or are you a larger person? Well, you can take the both options. Why not?
Okay. Alright, so moving on to my second analysis, I'm going to be reviewing only the introduction to the final Breaking Bad episode. Now, I haven't been a big fan of Breaking Bad. However, the camera movements and analysis of Breaking Bad has actually been, really, really effective because I've been able to learn a lot of things, especially as a media student. So obviously, it fades in from black to a few portraits on the wall. Now, it starts to pan really, really slowly towards the left. It's using a really wide shot here. It's using a wide lens. It's
probably 20 mil.
About 20 mil, exactly.
Like
so obviously, you can see it's panning around the room really slowly as an establishing shot. It acts as an establishing shot, but it also sets up the rest of the scene. Now, this scene has an amazing mind blowing effect. Mind blow. Because obviously it the plot twist which you'll see in a minute is really well. Now, there's a lot of slow slow moving tension, so it builds it up really slowly, but it does it absolutely beautifully. So obviously, as you can see here, a wide lens to the left, and it rests on the main character, one of the main characters, sorry, one of the main characters on the phone, and you can just about hear the phone going off. Now you can hear the answer phone. Obviously, you're still able to pick up the answer phone, so you can hear the answer phone saying, you know, we need to talk. So as it picks up, immediately we have about 2 minutes worth of static shots. Now these static shots aren't exactly the biggest part in this plot twist, but they do build up the tension slightly with the actual conversation that's going on between them. Now obviously Skye obviously answers the phone first, and she starts to talk, so the focus on her, the angle itself changes, the lens itself changes as well, so we see her in a bright light. Half of her face is covered absolutely beautifully. So obviously we initially saw this dark room, now we see the dark room on her right side and the light room from the window on her left side. Obviously we see the shadow of some sort of random black object to the right of the hand side of the screen as well. However, that just sort of acts as though it's to block that side of the screen. For what purpose we don't actually know yet.
But we hopefully soon will know.
Hopefully soon will know.
So if we
so obviously the next 2 minutes is obviously tension is built with essentially no camera movement and static shots, the occasional sort of focus. Now obviously, after just having these 2 minutes worth of static shots, the tension's already built and the stage is set for a massive plot twist. We're already expecting as an audience subconsciously that something's going to happen.
Yeah.
We don't know yet. Obviously, we've had a conversation where we've heard the conversation where Walter White is missing.
Yeah.
We don't know where he is. Yeah. Where is he gone? Blah blah.
I mean, however, the tension is just rising to a point where we know something's going to happen. Something can't happen,
has to happen,
because that's just not very nice. If they've got up tension, nothing happens.
So going back to that establishing shot we just came from initially, obviously we see the camera in basically the same place, starts to edge forward slowly, a dolly shot that is motivated, absolutely beautiful, starts to move forward, and
what do you know?
And lo and behold, the pillar, the dark object that we saw in the close-up of Skye, the pillar that's been stood there, basically covering a part of the scene that we're actually meant to be seeing. That whole establishing shot where we think we know what's in the room, we clearly don't. It starts to move forward, revealing one of the biggest plot twists, in my opinion, in the entire episode, the whole franchise,
or even the franchise.
Even the franchise.
I mean, I don't think many people expected this. I mean, they were expecting something, but this
we were expecting
completely out of the blue.
So first of all, we obviously got the initial establishing shot where the audience knows where we are, what's happening, and obviously, it sets up the rest of the scene, so we think we know what's going to happen. Obviously, the tension's built. We just see the close-ups of the two girls, and then all of a sudden we go back to that wide angle, wide lens establishing shot, and it moves forward really slowly in the dolly shot, revealing Walter White. Reply to Skye when she says 5 minutes, and honestly, it's probably one of the biggest twists in the whole series.
But I mean, it's really well done, because they've placed it in such a way as sort of in the start when they move the camera around. You didn't see any hint of him at all, in any presence at all in the entire building, and it's only as soon as that dolly shot, when they move forward, do you actually see him appear, and you're thinking to yourself, how many times do you think they must have rehearsed that to get that perfectly? Because that wooden pole is only just wide enough to hide him behind it, let alone move about.
Especially with the lighting on the floor as well, with the light comes off the window. I mean, this scene obviously makes you feel, I don't know, it makes you feel as though you've just been manipulated by Skye and White at the same time, and you're also like that woman on the other side of the phone where you don't know where White is.
And it's like the director's just like, haha, I played you, I tried to show you some real story.
You've been befooled, Papa.
You've been bamboozled.
Bamboozled.
My next chosen clip is it's a documentary that I've decided to choose. It's basically a quick backstory. It's based in China. It's called the Silicon Valley of Hardware. There's a city in China called Shenzhen, where that's where they make all of the, I wouldn't say clones, but copied sort of design of things. And it's really because, as they explain in the whole thing, it's not just a complete rip-off, because in Shenzhen they have to give sort of an IP to everyone, so it's like fair use for technology over there.
Yeah.
So no one can actually have an idea and patent it like they can in Western society. which makes it really interesting to have the like evolution of technology. So, and this is really
As
interesting.
though it's like a race between
Yeah.
techs.
And what's really interesting is in this documentary they show the difference between like the big corporations manufacturing these devices, and in other shots they show the streets of Shenzhen, where to be honest it's a really stark difference from when you see these tall sort of skyscraper buildings. They are reaching so high because of the sort of dense mass of the buildings they have in Shenzhen. And then if you look at these clips, all you see is like really cramped back alleys basically.
Yeah.
And this is using a mix of portrait and wide angle lenses to show the effect. Like this shot right here, you have what looks like a seafood market next to more markets, and what it looks like maybe 3 people wide gap. It sort of shows how densely populated and sort of how the whole city works really. It's all just sort of one big community rather than sort of separate, like you would probably see in New York, for example. They're all separate buildings where everyone sort of collided together to make one huge community. And there are comments about how this can be unsafe and all that. I mean, they don't particularly look like very nice alleyways, like what we would consider nice alleyways. But little to behold, down these alleyways, you can actually find some real gems of actually someone set up a shop selling iPhone parts in an alleyway.
Next to other competitors as
Next to other competitors. And I mean, right, this guy, he's welding his motorcycle, as you normally would do, in the middle of a street in China. I mean, no one really... I mean, the way their community's made, it's sort of... They don't really mind what people are doing as long as they're doing something, really. It's sort of... I mean, all these wide-angle shots, as I keep going on about, just keep showing the stark differences between sort of like the businesses and monopolies and sort of the regular Joe set up a shop on the street corner. I mean, like, that's legitimately a corner of a housing like estate, and he's just set up a little shop selling hardware for technology, and it's just crazy seeing the stark difference between everything. And I don't want to go on to about too much because also this is, I mean, a lot of documentaries are single camera drama. This is one of them. I mean, there can be dual or even more cameras in a documentary, but this one really, as it goes, it really does focus on emotions.
Yeah, it really does.
And I mean, a lot of it is handheld. Most of the interviews are on tripods, of course, because you don't really want to shake an interview because that just looks unprofessional. And it just, I guess you could say, it shows the city from how we would see it. And
from our sort of Western view, we obviously think a corner market is obviously pretty lights, pretty shops everywhere. You know, certain areas for different shops.
And these
whereas
are just
obviously here
cardboard boxes
it's just
on the
cardboard
ground.
boxes. It's tables with some phone parts on it. That's basically what it is.
And
obviously for these guys, it is.
That's normal.
It's their normal. Yeah.
It's their normal, and that's
normal.
how they make their daily lives. And I mean, as they go in the documentary, they do say how people don't really like you filming there because it's such an enclosed society, like exclusive, that
it's almost as if you have to record someone's face just to be able to record a wide angle of the actual.
So a lot of in this, they did have to say that they had to put the camera down by their waist because as soon as you saw them, if you saw someone recording with a large camera in their faces, they would ask you to probably put it down, because they could really stop you and probably call the police.
Yeah.
And it's just, the shots in there are just they're really sort of soul wrenching for a documentary. How just, also the colour correction does help as well, because it goes from sort of like, it's all really cool coloured, which sort of makes you feel like cold, how like dense it is.
Yeah. Introduction of Mr. Turner, Will Turner. Now, his initial introduction is probably, I don't want to say the funniest, but it is probably the most cliche way, recognizable cliche way of actually making him instantly a likable and relatable character by one small movement, where he looks up to see, he looks up at the wall to see obviously the lights and the candles. Obviously he goes to sort of fill it with a candle and a bit breaks off. Obviously he sort of looks around the room to see where he can get rid of it, and obviously just puts it in a little bucket to his left as, you know, one of the servants sort of walk in. Now, obviously Swan's dad, who's obviously the governor, walks down the stairs. Obviously, you can already see that his hierarchy, the social hierarchy between him and Mr. Swan. Mr. Swan's obviously set basically instantly because he's on the floor. He's on the floor on the ground already, sort of fiddling with stuff, breaking it. Whereas he sort of elegantly glides down these stairs. Glides down these stairs wearing completely different clothes to him.
I mean, even the camera techniques from this, you can tell that he stood much higher than the other guy, and it's just it creates that hierarchy.
So obviously, the lens they use is obviously it's a fairly wide one. I'd say it's slightly wider than the standard. Sort of
so probably 30, 36 mil, maybe 32.
30, not as obviously wide as the 20, which we saw in other clips, but obviously wide. Basically to show essentially what society sort of deems between the two anyway. So obviously to the left of the screen we see flowers, we see a ground clock, we see closed curtains, stuff like that. And obviously we can see the difference between the Governor Swan and Mr. Turner sort of just stood between each other. Now, when Mr. Turner actually brings out that sword in the clip, it honestly looks like probably one of the most decent shots that I've seen in a while. Obviously, they use a macro lens essentially to see, essentially to look at the detail as the depth of field actually gradually disperses amongst the sword as well. So you see the handle.
So it's a focus shift, really.
Focus shift. Obviously, you can see the handle. Obviously, you can see the really good detail in the handle as the rest of the blade sort of slightly creeps out of focus. He picks up the sword and obviously demonstrating his physical and cognitive ability to do with blacksmithing and obviously sword, making sword, stuff like that. Sort of hands it over by essentially bowing. Obviously, again, what society deems it, what is appropriate between the two. His formal knowledge, obviously, he remains formal when he speaks to the governor. He bows, he talks about it as though he's a sir. He talks about this sword that he's just made for him. And it shows his knowledge, obviously, of the sword itself. So,
and swordsmanship.
Yeah, precisely. So obviously, there's the character development for Turner. Obviously, shows two different sides of him straight away. First of all, his formal knowledge of the sword and blacksmithing itself, and his physical ability. So obviously, as he sort of gives over the sword, he's obviously talking about it, what the sword is making, what it can do, how it's good. Not at one point does he actually say he's good with the sword. He demonstrates that physically in front of the governor by throwing it up into the air to flip it in order to hand it over to the governor. The governor acts, impressed, sort of as though it was a bit of a circus trick.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, doesn't really recognise his talent or ability, and sort of just shuts him down, essentially saying, you know what, thank you for your sword, thank your master for me.
Yeah.
And obviously through simple acting, all it is a simple look up. Obviously the clip I've just paused on, excellent. You can see the disbelief in his eyes and the doubt. He looks up and he sort of looks at the governor as though he's just praised his master on making the sword,
making him look lower,
making him look even lower than a blacksmith.
Yeah.
Saying, congratulate your master on this absolutely beautiful sword. He looks up and goes, you can see that Will's obviously made the sword and he knows his knowledge, obviously from that development where he shows his formal knowledge and his skill, and then obviously onto the fact that he's just been essentially disrespected, but unknowingly disrespected. Yeah, and obviously now I need to look at Mr. Sparrow. Now,
see this. I think this is a magnificent clip by itself.
So do I.
It's just
so
amazing.
Obviously, Pirates of the Caribbean is one of the first one. Black Pearl is probably one of the greatest films that I've watched in a while. The rest of them haven't been that good or successful because they've sort of inappropriately done the rest of them, if I'm honest. They've made Jack the sole character. Now, Jack wasn't actually meant to be the character. Through the research that I've done, it was meant to be Elizabeth and Will who were the main protagonists.
Wow.
Obviously, they were introduced first and their characters were developed first because, for a reason, essentially. However, obviously, Captain Jack Sparrow was actually meant to be like a Han Solo sort of character. He was meant to be vain, he was meant to be arrogant, he was meant to be good looking, stuff like that.
A helper almost.
Yeah, he was essentially meant to be a helper. But however, his introduction is probably one of the greatest introductions in the movie, which is probably why
Everyone remembers him.
Everyone remembers him more. Now, first of all, we see Jack with his back towards the camera, as he's essentially standing on a ship proudly with proud music behind him. Obviously, we see it from a low angle, so as it sort of pans and tilts up as well. The tilt cranes moves up as well.
Yeah, we'd have to use a crane for that shot.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, we can see, off in the distance, a bit of a port. Now we see a reverse shot again of, the wind flowing through his hair and his hat and all of his clothes and stuff. He's holding onto his ship as he sort of moves across. Now the initial sort of sway of the ship itself as well is obviously a small detail, but obviously one that's kind of key for someone who's on a boat. Now the music slightly dies down, only slightly, as he sort of looks down towards his ship, and obviously he jumps down off a frame. We see it from a low angle. So that initial introduction would have been using a slightly wider frame, but not too wide. Obviously, it's probably about 40 something.
Yeah.
Obviously, we should go back to a fairly standard lens. Obviously, re-establishing the shot that it's not actually a ship. It's not actually a nice big cruiser. It's not a dreadnought. It's a little boat. Which he looks down, sort of looking at his crew, and then obviously when he actually jumps down, he's not actually on a big ship. He's not looking at his crew whatsoever. We expect the introduction of his first crew, of his first officer and his crew and his captain and stuff. Obviously, he jumps down into water into a little wooden dinghy essentially. Now obviously we go through a little bit worth of character development to see what kind of person he is. Obviously, he picks up a bucket. And starts shoveling out water, essentially to show that he cares slightly about his boat, and he's trying to essentially make it to shore. Obviously, the simple honorary scene we see, the shot we see, is obviously where we go past a couple hanged pirates,
and he sort
of salutes them with taking his hat off, etc. Now, the introduction itself, obviously, that's his character's introduction. However, the development after that is absolutely beautiful. It's probably one of the greatest shots that I've seen in the entire Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. As we go back to the scene. Obviously, he goes back to where he was stood initially, on top of the mast, looking proud, as though his own ship is there. It's under him. All of his crew's there. He starts going he starts essentially sinking towards the dock, obviously where he's meant to be going. Obviously, with this absolutely stunning and proud music behind him. Obviously, he's there. He's a badass. This is all part of his plan. All until he strodes onto the dock as if all of that was a part of his plan. Obviously, you can see him basically shoveling out water to try and make it to the dock. And then as it starts to go in, obviously, because there are so many people watching him, he gets up and he stands proud, even though his ship is sinking.
And he just walks off.
Dock. And all he does is simply walk off elegantly and strides across the dock as though it was all part of his plan.
That shot is just great.
Absolutely amazing shot.
It has to be it's just magnificent. And last but not least, I have decided to go over a narrative music video. I mean, most music videos do have a narrative, but a lot of them don't. They're just made to accompany music, really. But this one, it is let me think of the name. It is Saving a Light by Gareth Emery and Stanwyck. I'll tell you right now, it's not a high-end production.
Yeah.
This is basically probably two guys, one on sound, one on camera, maybe one of them also being the director. It wasn't a multi-million pound budget or anything. It was just done as a project, really, to accompany this music video. But I think the way they made it, because they made it essentially to have you envision so the story's about a girl who basically has depression, and friends who bully her, they're not really friends, and they try to make the audience feel this same sense of depression, and they use this through just using ultra wide angle lens after ultra wide angle lens shot. As you can see, the first shot with her walking down the corridor is almost bowed of how wide it is. So it's probably, I'm even maybe thinking it's a 12mm. It's
Yeah.
super
It
wide.
is so wide. It's almost as if it was like a 180-degree angle.
Almost. And you can see it, like, especially on, like, the border for the notice board, that it's not a straight line. And this is a tracking shot of her walking backwards, sort of, while the camera's moving backwards. You see it's handheld, it's not smooth, but it's also to create that effect of what it feels like to have depression. Nothing is smooth sailing when you have depression.
Yeah.
It is a tough ride. And this theme continues on of her sort of like running and walking. And I mean, it does use portrait lens sometimes to really sort of show the emotion in her face and sort of really how the character is feeling. And I mean, some of the shots they would have to use cranes and stuff, but this one's a low angle shot showing sort of how the two are sort of connected in a way. And this is actually English. It's British. It's made on the coast. I'm not sure which coastline it is, but it is on the coast. And is obviously that's using a crane because you wouldn't want to have a cameraman suddenly floating off the side of a cliff. It's a bit impossible, but again uses a wide angle lens to sort of show everything around it because everything is bowed. I mean, even the blinds in that previous shot were not straight. They were completely just bowed out, and it really just adds to the sense of you're understanding what she's going through.
Yeah.
And then in sort of the final shot, like one of my favourite shots is when she starts to turn around when she's basically thinking about jumping off a cliff.
Yeah.
And no one, of course, you're not going to actually see her jump off a cliff because no one wants to see that resolution in any kind of thing.
Ever.
Unless you're watching, of course, Mr. Gillett's old film where he actually did get one of his colleagues to jump off a cliff. See? I remember that. And see, that's, again, this is a wide angle shot, there's no doubt around it. You get to see a lot of the sea and sort of it's sort of even level with her eyes when she starts to turn around, and then you sort of see flashbacks of sort of the other main character, the helper, which is a mother of a teenage boy who you would connote from the entire music video that he has already committed suicide.
Yeah.
In a very similar fashion because it flashes back to the same shot as the girl, but with him there instead.
Yeah.
Sort of as she's been through the situation before. Yeah. And she's trying to help and everything, going back into her memories, and she's trying to stop her from jumping off a cliff basically, and just repeats the same shot over and over again for the same type of shot, and to build tension, and it really just adds to it. But the camera work, which I really like, is they decide to film it about the sun was about to set, and as the last moments of it comes in, the final resolution, that's when the sun actually begins to set on the water, and it sort of brings light into the entire shot, sort of like belief that she will make it.
Yeah, especially with the few quick cuts you can see the actual
like it goes back showing her
itself.
like depression, how it caused in the first place, and sort of how it really all builds up, and then it ends with a hug and the sun glare behind them, which is a really nice shot. And I'm tempted to say this is probably a 50mm lens just because of the depth of field is really good, and it's mainly to focus on the hug they're having to sort of, I guess you could say, relate to each other and to save her. And the final end shot is a nice wide angle of the coast with them in the corner, showing how close they were to the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
Like, a couple steps forward and she would have been gone, but
almost as if it was symbolic to say, you know, if she wasn't there to help her, then essentially she would have been gone
forever. And I mean, the music, it's electronic music, but it's very vocalized about the depression. And for what's rare as well, in this video there is sound in the video, which most music videos just sort of go over a couple of clips with no sound, but there is sound, and it just sort of adds to the realism of the clip. And it's a great watch, and it really is heart-wrenching once you sort of understand what is behind everything. Right, so this is a chat over Coco, and we are your presenters, Jack Ferns and Matt Razu, and we'll see you another time.